It has been super gloomy outside for the last couple of days, and I'm sick of it. Actually, let me show you what it looks like. Yeah, I'm sick of it, and I need something bright to spice up my life, so I'm gonna make some bright clothing. I had a look through my assortment of scrap fabrics for the funkiest and brightest patterns, and I found these two candidates. So this one is a 4-way stretch, and I think it would work fantastic for a pair of leggings. Red and blue galaxy effect, which we'll start with first. I grabbed one of my current pair of leggings, and I'm going to use this as a template to trace out the pattern. So folding it in half, I then cut around it to create 2 front panels and 2 back panels. Here we have all 4 leg pieces cut out and ready to sew together. I put the 2 back panels and 2 front panels right sides facing together and then sewed along the crotch seam to make a whole panel for the front and a whole panel for the back. For this project, I set my sewing machine to a zigzag stitch, with the stitch length at about 2.5 and the stitch width at a 2, but be sure to experiment with your machine and a piece of scrap fabric to see what works best for you. I then place these 2 panels right sides facing. Obviously with this fabric it's kind of difficult to tell, but I am putting it right sides facing, and I'm sewing along the inseam. Alright, happy days. At this point it was getting pretty late in the evening, so I called it a night. Okay, it's the next day, and you can see I'm kind of excited with how it's looking. It's pretty cool, and I'm just needing to sew down the side seams now to create the legs where your legs go in. To finish up the legs, I hemmed both of them by folding over the bottom edge, maybe a centimeter or 2, and then running a zigzag stitch along this to secure it. My head in the clouds, your feet on my lap. The free arm on my machine was a huge help as it helps stretch everything evenly, but you could probably still do this without a free arm. It would just be a little bit more difficult. Then I needed to make a waistband, and I patched together all of the scrap fabric that was left to do this, which is why it looks so cool and funky. Obviously a waistband is a giant tube, so I sewed it short sides together and then the long ways together to create a channel for the elastic. When sewing this tube, remember to leave an opening wide enough to easily fit your elastic through. I then fed the elastic through the channel using a safety pin as always. Secure the safety pin onto the end of the elastic, then slip this into the channel, using the safety pin as a guide to sort of pull and pass the elastic all the way through the waistband until it comes out the other end, making sure to stretch everything so that it all laid down evenly. At this point, it's a good idea to check that your elastic is tight enough and it sits where you want it to sit before you sew it together at this point to secure it. Then cut off any excess elastic and fully enclose it, pushing it into the space and sewing that little gap in the waistband shut. And the waistband is done. So the last thing left to do is to attach the waistband to the main body of the leggings. As you can see, the waistband is smaller than the circumference of the main body, so when you flip the waistband right sides facing with the body, you'll also want to stretch it before sewing them together. And you'll have to wait until the end to see how it turned out. Remember that other swirly fabric we saw earlier? It's also stretchy, and I'm thinking it would make a really nice long sleeve top. So the pieces for this were a lot smaller, which means that a lot of patchwork was necessary to actually put this top together. And I'm using this other stretchy top that I own as the template. Instead of the last time where I just cut out the pattern because it was large enough to do that, I now place the pieces on top in the orientation that I think will look nice, and then I'm going to sew all of these together to make the panels. Now that I've essentially created new larger pieces of fabric, I'm laying the top that I'm using as a template over this and cutting around it to get the measurements for the front and back bodice pieces. And for the 2 sleeves. Voila! Now just to put the two bodice pieces right side facing.
I'll be right here. I'll be right here.
And sew along the shoulder seams and the side seams, and then also fold the sleeves in half. And sew along the arm sleeves.
Say what you wanna say. Stay if you wanna stay. I'll be right here. I'll be right here.
It was at this point that I decided to try on the bodice just to see how it was looking, and I was actually so chuffed. And I was like, do I still want to put the sleeves on? It kind of looks cool as like a sleeveless top. But then I was like, nah, I already cut out the sleeves, so I might as well stick to the original plan and just put them on. As I was saying, I continued to sew up the sleeve. Also, if you notice that the sleeve was longer than it was in the previous frame, you'd make an excellent detective. I did add a bit more fabric on the end because I didn't want 3/4 sleeves. I just tried it on to see how tight I wanted it, and I'm going to take it in a bit more here. So once the sleeves were done and the bodice was done, I pinned the sleeves to the opening of the bodice, right sides facing. I just flipped it this way to give you a good idea of how things would look, but now I need to turn the sleeve inside out in order to sew it up without getting pricked by all of these pins. Okay, it seems like I managed. Did I mention that I'm using a shallow zigzag stitch for this entire project as well?
My head in the sand when you're not around. Read the palm of my hands and tell me how.
Very important, always remember to backstitch if you don't want all of your precious handmade clothes coming apart in the wash or after one wear. And then after this, I sewed along the armhole seam.
Slow it all down. I love you till my last breath.
At this point, the top is basically done, but you do want to finish up all of the seams really nicely. So I folded over the neck, the arms, and the bottom to hem them. And then I just put a zigzag stitch over that. You could probably also use a straight stretch stitch if your machine allows for that, but I was not about to change any of my settings.
Smile to pass the time. Promise you'll try, and I will too.
Okay, are you ready to see the final items on?